that so that it's right there. The next one. President of America in the 1950s, Eisenhower, plans are nothing. Anyone can make plans. Planning is everything. So what's the difference? Planning is the doing of the plan. Planning is looking at what do I need to succeed? What equipment do I need? What knowledge do I need? What resources? What strategies? Where might I fail? How do I avoid failure? Or how do I improve after I have a setback? And so planning is everything. It will cause you to succeed or to stop, basically. And one of the richest businessmen in the world, Warren Buffett, someone sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago.
Long time ago.
Your students are going to become building contractors, road builders, university administrators. Maybe they'll work police force or the Air Force. Maybe they will be bakers or cooks of fried rice, who knows? They will be doing things that further the track. Someone will say, I love going to this cafe. It's been here for decades and they always make such wonderful meals consistently. Someone else will say, it's so good I can drive from, let's say, Surabaya to Yogyakarta in just 5 hours. It used to take 8 or 9 hours. Why is that? Because someone planned that there should be a road there. And then the road constructors, they had to do a lot of planning to make sure that the road was built on budget, hopefully, on time, hopefully, but also to a quality that would last. And so now for many years, people have driven quite quickly from Surabaya to Yogyakarta. And I'm sure in Sumatra there would be similar examples. And so Warren Buffett's is something to really plant a seed for your students to say, do you realize that McDonald's once started as a single restaurant? Do you realize that Honda was a man who studied engineering? Things like this, that things started out with one idea and one effort and built upon that effort and built upon that consistency until someone planted a tree a long time ago, and now someone is sitting in the shade of that tree. Okay, so planning. Planning is not just writing the compulsory plan you need to do for the administrator and then quickly looking at it and say, okay, I'm on page 58 today. Planning happens before term, and that's when, yes, you will do your official plans, but there's also the living plan. Before class, you know that last class, the students had a lot of difficulty with this concept. And so you found a short 2-minute video that visualizes the concept you're trying to convey to them. Starting class, don't just turn up, oh, I'm on time, excellent. Think about the questions you're going to ask. Think about the linked conversation. You could even keep a list of the linked conversations because you don't want every Tuesday to be about a conversation about breakfast. You want to have different linked conversations, and hopefully linked conversations that actually link to the lesson you're going to teach. And so you might plan by keeping a list of the linked conversations. So you can have a look before you start class and write down the last one you used. And make sure you're not repeating. So plan your linked conversation, not just spontaneously, but actually intentionally. And during class, there is an old saying among teachers that you tell the students what they are going to do. Then you tell the students what they are doing. You can imagine that perhaps at the start of class, you tell the students what they are going to do. You might be standing at the front of the class. But the second part, when you are telling the students what they are doing, you're probably walking around the class and you're telling them what the next step is. You're telling them to remember to use capital letters. You're telling them to remember about the three-step process in observation. So you tell them what they are going to do. Then you tell them what they are doing. Then you tell them what they have done, so that they realize that the activity wasn't just doing something, but learning something. So in telling them what they will do, are doing, and have done, you're actually telling them what they will learn, what they are learning, and what they have learned. And so that happens during class. And again, it's not just spontaneous only, although there is certainly time for spontaneity, but it is also intentional. And so the what have you learned is part of the concluding class. Ideally, you should have a plan for what the students will walk out of class with. Maybe they'll walk out with a fascination for Tesla cars, electric cars. Maybe they'll walk out with a basic knowledge of how an electric car works. Maybe they'll walk out with questions that they are going to try and find the answers to. Okay, and so concluding class should also be planned as part of your lesson plan. Don't worry, the spontaneity will happen. It's when there's just a gap that we have to worry about, and that should be planned for so it doesn't happen. Okay, here's a bit of reading for you to do. And actually, I'm going to switch to my laptop to read it to you. This is John Hattie on the art of teaching. Okay, John Hattie on the art of teaching. The act of teaching reaches its epitome of success after the lesson has been structured, after the content has been delivered, and after the classroom has been organized. Remember, we are talking about rules, or are we? It's much deeper than just rules. This is an entire environment that you are creating in your classroom among your learners. And so the fruits of that, the success of that, the product of all those things only happens after the lesson has been structured. Excuse me. After the content has been delivered and after the classroom has been organized. The art of teaching and its major successes relate to what happens next, the manner in which the teacher reacts to how the student interprets, accommodates, rejects, and or reinvents the content and skills. How the student relates and applies the content to other tasks, and how the student reacts in light of success and failure, apropos the content and methods that the teacher taught. Learning is spontaneous, individualistic, and often earned through effort. It is a time-worn, slow, gradual, fits and starts kind of process, which can have a flow of its own, but requires passion, patience, and attention to detail. And I've added there from the student, from the teacher and the student. Okay, what are we talking about here? Spontaneity, as I referred to a moment ago, happens after all of the intentional planning. So the structure of the lesson has been planned, set up. It's been organized. The students have been put into their groups. The students have been given guidelines, rules, aims, goals for this project, for this activity. But the real learning happens when all of that has been done, and then you get to a point when then you can say to the students, okay, now you've learned about this, what else could this point be applied to? What does this tell us? Going back to my analogy from a previous session about the plants. We studied tropical plants and we compared them to desert plants. What does this tell us about pine trees? What does this tell us about fruit trees? And so that's when that spontaneity comes into play. Students start telling you that they grow carrots at home. And so then the lesson goes slightly off plan and on to real learning. And so John Hattie is telling us that we need to set everything up so that the spontaneity and the learning magic, if you like, can happen. Putting it another way, actors learn their lines perfectly. They learn where to walk on the stage. They learn where to face, where to turn, where to look, and they learn the whole thing. And then when they perform, they have the freedom to be spontaneous because they have a very solid foundation, because they've rehearsed their lines, they've practiced every part of the play. And that gives them the freedom to be spontaneous on the night of the performance. And so that's the same with learning. If you set it up very carefully and intentionally, you will have the freedom to respond to the students' reactions to the learning. Okay, let's continue. So the best rules are guidelines. Where I'm from in Australia, it is often said that rules are made to be broken, which is not a very helpful philosophy, especially when all of the students know it. Rules are very binary. They're on or off, they're black and white, they're yes or no. And that can cause problems for the teacher and problems in the learning process as well. And so guidelines are far more effective. Focus on effort. The teacher might say, I want to see you working. Not, It's time to work, you must be silent. It's time to work, you must stay seated. But I want to see that you're working. And that gives the freedom for a student to stand up and go and look at the poster on the wall. It gives the student the freedom to go and look up a book, or to ask the teacher, or even ask a friend. So if the student is not doing what they are supposed to be doing, the focus is on, what are you doing in this task? What have you done? What effort have you made? Not, why are you out of your chair, which would be a rule. Now, I'd just like to pause for a moment and say that if you are coming from a fairly traditional classroom with maybe 30 students all in rows, you are not going to be able to make this change overnight. If you are in a Zoom classroom with 30 students and you don't have a second external monitor, so you can't, in order to see them all the time, you are not going to be able to implement these strategies immediately. But they certainly are things to look towards, to work towards. And so focusing on effort from your point of view, especially online, the positive, encouraging words that you use will really help. And also the goals. A student needs to produce a certain product. It doesn't really matter if they have a lot of examples in the essay or a lot of instruction in the essay, or the writing is more descriptive or poetic. If they can still achieve the aim of the essay, then they have done well. And so celebrating those differences along the way to get to the result is very important. So focusing on the effort rather than just the result is helpful. Okay, focus on sincerity. You know your students. If you don't, you need to get to know them as well as possible. You know when they are sincere and when they are just wanting to have a lazy day or something. And then maybe they've been sincere about that. But build up that sincerity. We're here together to learn as much as we possibly can. I'm not here as your police officer. I'm here as your learning partner, facilitator. Okay, focus on strategies. Don't say to a student, some students have finished and you're only up to number 2. What's wrong? The student is not going to answer, I was looking for a strategy, sir. So if the student's only up to number 2, say, what are you doing? I'm writing. What strategy did you use in number 2? I used this. Okay, good. I'll be back in a moment. And before you start number 3, I'd like to see what strategy you're going to use for number 3. And when you come back, probably they don't have a strategy for number 3, but you will give it to them and they'll do number 3 really quickly. And then you'll say, find the strategy for number 4. You can ask your friends. And then you check on them and they're up to number 5. And you say, what strategy are you using for number 5? Yes, teachers need to private chat or WhatsApp a lot to their students online. Teachers need to walk around a lot in the physical classroom. Encourage small steps in the right direction. The example I just gave fits into this as well. Just checking back on the student, giving them the small step of giving them the strategy, asking them to ask a friend for the next strategy, asking them to think of the strategy themselves and check with you. Small steps in the right direction. And encourage learners to help each other learn. The key word there is learn. Learn is not the answer. Learn is the process. Learn is the strategies. Learn is the attitude, the persistence, the effort. Encourage your students to get alongside each other in the process. For some of you, you may need to completely flip it upside down. The way you learned in high school yourself might be the exact opposite of how you need to teach these students. It's not about the answer, it's about the learning. It's about the learning process. Okay, now we move on to something I felt was important to put in here. Some teachers will include English in their classroom, and in some schools they do have English as their learning language. And so we need to ask, is there a place for bilingualism in the classroom? I think bilingualism, or having Indonesian and English in the one classroom, can often fail. It can often not succeed. So here is the way that it can succeed. First of all, we have options here. This kind of sums up what people think about two languages in one classroom. Some teachers are given the task of teaching English, say, and so they start off the classroom with Selamat Pagi, and they have a good old chat in Indonesian or perhaps in the local language. And they say it's because they want the students to be more expressive. They want the students to say more things first, almost to warm them up. So they start in the local language or the national language and not the target language. Some teachers allow the students to do the entire activity in, say, Indonesian in order to find the English answers. And C, supaya mereka merasa nyaman dalam kelas. For social reasons, they will let the students speak Indonesian in an English class. And D, supaya mereka mengerti lebih dalam, so that they understand to a deeper level. That is the answer, the only answer that is valid. If you are an English teacher or another foreign language, let's say an English teacher, start your class in English. Basa-basi, small talk, chatting, questioning, linked conversations in English. Continue on with instructions in English and then repeat the instructions in Indonesian for clarity so that the learning experience will be deeper. Then, if you need to, in the middle of the activity, stop everyone and have a very academic conversation or a deep conversation in Indonesian. That is perfectly fine. And the product of that deep conversation will be expressed with help from the teacher in English. So the result of the discussion about the topic in Indonesian is a presentation in simplified form in the target language. And that's really important, that you start in English for an English classroom and you end in English as well. Okay, so greet the students, answer the Indonesian questions in simple English. It's an English class and the student asks you a question in Indonesian. Don't tell them off. Don't get upset. Just answer in English. And then ask them a question in English just to clarify whether they understood. Okay, and then deeper discussions must be in Indonesian or if they're in Indonesian, must be summarized in English to get the vocabulary and the expressions and even the sentence structure. Okay. And now we come to the discussion topic for this session, which you may answer now or possibly later on. And the discussion topic is, what guidelines would students like in the classroom? Okay, welcome back. The guidelines that most students agree with. Let's have a look. Anything that enables them to make an effort, they actually agree with. They want that. So noise levels that allow them to concentrate, students not running around doing other things that are not work, allow them to put in an effort into their work. So most students will agree with rules that allow every student to make an effort. Some students work well with others or around others. And if you put that student, because they were talking over by themselves, possibly you will get less productivity from them. They need social interaction in order to produce effort, perhaps. And so anything that helps a student produce effort is going to be a good rule. Time. Students actually value time. When you tell them that they have 15 minutes to complete 50 questions, they will disrespect you because of the impossible task you've given them. Don't make them beg. Don't give them a huge task and let them beg and negotiate down to a smaller number. That is not constructive. But tell them, well, don't give them 50 questions in 15 minutes, but give them a reasonable amount and say, now, these are quick questions. You have 15 questions in 15 minutes. So how many minutes per question? 1. So keep an eye on the clock and make sure you're not getting too far behind. That after 10 minutes, you should have done 10 questions. Or alternatively, you might tell them that they have 50 questions and they need to do as many as possible, but you don't expect anyone to get to the end. And probably there'll be 1 or 2 who can get to the end. But tell them the expectation. Here are 50 questions. I don't expect you to finish them. I want to see how many you can do in the time I'm giving you. And so any rules, and I tend not to say the word rules in my class, but expectations, any expectations or guidelines around time will be appreciated. Again, you might have noted that previously I said I prefer not to give homework because homework is often the work that was not done in class and then does not get done properly at home, either because the student copies their friend or phones their friend or a parent helps out or something like that. But I will send students home or off out of class to investigate. And they don't think it's homework. They know it's learning and knowledge and it's an adventure. Stopping unfair advantage. The student who always complains and whinges so that they get the teacher's attention actually causes the other students to cause trouble because they feel that the first student had an unfair advantage. But if you know that that student is really anxious and they are probably going to complain when you say, okay, start the task, it is much better to be standing next to that student and say, okay, when we start, I'm going to help you first. And then I'm going to help anyone else who needs help. And so the complaining won't happen and the unfair advantage won't be seen by the other students. Online, it possibly is easier if you train your students to send private messages in the chat, because the other students won't know if a student sends a dumb question, a question that might be embarrassing. And so the help can actually be given without everyone noticing, and that unfair advantage is not really noticed or seen. It doesn't exist. So that is one advantage to the online system, in that if you do it properly, you can train up your students to use the online chat to you, and you need to know and even encourage that they should do online chat to each other about the process, not about the answer. Okay? Don't let them become people who chase the cheap answer. You want them to become people who want to pursue the challenge, pursue the learning. Okay, and so we have a number of understandings that I'm going to list here that replace rules. An open mind, a soft heart, energy, motivation, security make learning worthwhile. This description applies equally to teachers and students. A teacher needs an open mind to accept students as they are. Students need an open mind with learning, to try, to make the effort because the teacher said this will be worthwhile. The teacher and student both need a soft heart. They need to have empathy for others. They need to be kind to others who are learning. They need security. The teacher brings that security to the classroom by not laughing at people's mistakes, but actually appreciating that the mistake was made and that some learning has happened. If you can provide a secure classroom, which means students do not get teased or bullied, then everyone will really appreciate the learning and the community aspect of your classroom. Okay, and your learning, their learning will be worthwhile. Okay, so some understandings here. A traditional teacher could possibly have been accused of being commanding, like a major general, and demanding. Now, major generals are in the army for a good reason, but they don't really have a place in this millennium in the classroom, except maybe a military classroom. Replace it with inviting. You're not demanding the students do the task. You're inviting them, encouraging them, and asking them and convincing them that this is a task that's worth doing. Your examples should not be so general that they don't really say anything. They should be specific, and many different specific examples, but specific examples, because students are often rather binary, rather black and white. And so giving specific examples, but many different ones, will enable them to get an understanding of the overall process. Be very selective if you are going to criticize, fail, dismiss, score, rank, shame, ignore, or label. You must have very good reason for doing any of those things. And I would suggest that shame, ignore, and label should never happen in your classroom. Ask your parents or your grandparents, and they will probably tell you stories of being shamed, ignored, and labeled in their classrooms. But this is not something of the new millennium. Even ranking and scoring to a lesser degree have a limited place, a specific place. And so, yeah, dismissing not needed either. And failing is only at a specific time. But failing and improving, I failed this time and now I know the strategies I need to pass. That's growth mindset. Okay. Encourage, empower, and champion. I put a V there because champion can be a verb. You can champion your learners. Good morning, learners. It's great to see you with your brains switched on today. The best students dominate. That is not a good long-term strategy. Bring in lots of group work, shared tasks. No shame, everyone is valued. Different students achieve different levels in different skills, but everyone is improving. And of course you have your assessment because everyone needs to improve before going to the next class, the next level up. But within the learning process, no shame and everyone needs to be valued. It's a very important. So all of these guidelines, these attitudes become the rules of the classroom. So you can ask a student, are you sharing? Are you valuing your friend's effort? Or are you being demanding? Or are you inviting them to help you with the work? Ask your students for specific examples about things rather than explaining one great large concept. Give the students who dominate something to do, a special task, an extra research project that will satisfy their intellectual curiosity. And so you and the students can develop an open mind, a soft heart, energy for learning, motivation for learning, security in the classroom, whether that be the Zoom classroom or the physical classroom. And when learning is seen as worthwhile, it becomes a purpose of its own. And that is a wonderful thing. And so we've looked at the classroom kingdom, teacher presence, student engagement, deeper purposes. We've got growth mindset, our fair work rules, teachers guide the students to make clear and practical guidelines. So what I'm doing here is we've already done the I will tell you what we will do, and we've done the I am telling you what you are doing, and now I'm telling you what we have done. Teachers, millennial teachers, you guide your students to make clear and practical guidelines for how to work in class. So you can actually ask them at the start of the term or the start of the year, typically in July. Gather them together, even if it's, I hope it's not online in July, but even if it is, and say, okay, we've got a learning journey ahead of us. Tell them a few of the topics they're going to learn about during the year, some of the great projects they'll be doing, some of the wonderful concepts they'll learn about. Play them a 2-minute video on skydiving or something that's going to get them all excited, as long as it's related to the topic. And then say to them, so that we can all experience all of this learning, we need to set down some guidelines. Could you write down now, you say to your students, could you write down now 3 points that you think every student should live by in this classroom? And whether you get them to share publicly or you have them posted in, WhatsApped in maybe, and then you go through them, it's up to you. If you have a lot of trust in your class, then you could discuss them openly. Being the start of the year, probably it's a good idea to do it secretly, confidentially, and then you can go through and you can present to the students Thank you so much for your input. This has been very valuable to me, and it will be very valuable to you. The top rule that students wrote in their top 3, the most popular thing, was they want to have time, you students, you want to have time to get your work done. And so I'm going to make a commitment that introductions to the lesson will be only 3 minutes, unless it's a very complicated concept. And I'm going to make the commitment so that you can have that. And I want you to make a commitment too, that you will value each other's time, so that when the work starts, you're not talking to your friend about something else and taking their learning time away from them. See what we've done there? We've taken the students' concept of time and turned it into a rule about no talking, or no irrelevant talking, or no off-task talking. But we don't have to mention don't talk as a rule. We talk about valuing time. The next one is their launch pad, and that is basically the culmination of the classroom kingdom, of the teacher having the presence, the student engagement, the deeper purposes, identifying the deeper purposes to learning for the students. If you don't do that, then you're not going to get to their launch pad. And please note that it's my classroom kingdom. The teacher is responsible for that. You are responsible for your students' learning. If a student graduates from your class and they don't know how to do long division in a math class at a certain level, that's because you failed in your responsibility. If long division was one of the critical points that needed to be learned, it is not the student who has failed, but it is the teacher, sorry to say, who has failed in helping the student to learn. And so my classroom kingdom. Then we get to the rules, and it's all of us, the teacher and the students, all of them. And it needs to be shared. So if a teacher makes a mistake, the teacher says sorry and thanks the students for helping him or her with the mistake and moves on. And the students copy that behavior. If the teacher says there needs to be a time to work and please don't talk about other things, and then the teacher is talking to another teacher at the door, then it's not our Fair Work rules. It's one rule for me and one rule for them. So it must be our Fair Work rules. And if the teacher needs to talk to the other teacher, they should excuse themselves and say, I really need to talk to this teacher. Please continue on with your work. I will be back in 2 minutes. And if it's online and the teacher during an activity can be seen playing on their phone, it's going to be very difficult for the teacher to tell the students that they need to concentrate on the Zoom classroom. And so we get to their launch pad. My, our, their. You want students to get out of the classroom and apply the knowledge in their life, in their world, their environment. And so there's a point when they need to take responsibility for their learning. Or to be more precise, their learning will only become valuable once they take responsibility for it. So the question that we'll be exploring is how can students become self-sufficient? And we'll explore that in the final session. Thank you. Okay, Millennial teachers, this is the final session, their launch pad. So we've gone through the classroom kingdom, which is the teacher's responsibility. It's my responsibility because I am responsible for my students' learning, for my students' development, for my students' growth in understanding. We've gone through our fair work rules. That is our shared responsibility, the teacher and the students. And so if the teacher doesn't do what he or she expects the students to do, the teacher needs to apologize. And the teacher needs to expect that the students will carry out the understandings that they have all agreed to. And that brings us to their launch pad. And so the question for us as teachers is, how can students become self-sufficient in their learning? And so we need to look at questions. We need to make sure that the questions you are asking them have a purpose, but also that the questions create purpose. And so different questions can cause different types of thinking. And so we're going to go through some of those, but really I'm just trying to plant a seed in your minds so that when you're doing your planning, you will also plan in your questions. And so the questions will be purposeful because the questions you ask will cause the students to think in different ways. Let's have a look. What, when, who, where? And this applies to any language, so it's completely translatable. What, when, who, where are information questions. What are the ingredients in the cake? When can we pick apples? Who is the expert in this area? Where should we go to find something? There's also how and why, but let's look at the difference here. We also have a very specific question. Do you like spicy food? the answers are going to be different types of answers. What spicy dishes do you like? What is your favorite food? And what would you serve someone recovering from food poisoning? So let's just go back through these different questions. What, when, who, where are fixed questions. What is the capital of Indonesia? Is still a fixed question until it moves to Kalimantan. I know the answer is Jakarta because of my memory. I remember that it is. I've read the fact in a book. I've been to Jakarta. I've seen it on a map. And so I remember. But it's a very fixed question. It's a memory question. What is the capital of England? I know there's only one answer, and that is London. I've never been there, but I have remembered reading it, listening to that fact, seeing that fact on a map. It's very fixed. But how questions and why questions talk about the process. They require some understanding, which is also known as higher order thinking. So not just knowing that cats are felines, but how being feline makes them behave differently and have perhaps different nutrition needs to dogs, horses, rabbits. And so how and why are more difficult to answer than what, when, who, and where. And so you need to be getting from the first list of questions to the second list as quickly as possible. You can't just reward students for knowing what, when, who, and where, and that's the end of the story. You need to move on quickly to the how and the why and get them to process that information. And that will probably, if you do it well, lead to more questions and even questions from the students themselves. Do you like spicy food? What type of a question is that? It requires an opinion. That's a good. But it's a yes question. It's rather closed. It's a bit more open-ended and extended if you ask, what spicy dishes do you like? And if the student says, oh, I don't like any spicy dishes, that's a valid answer. So you don't have to ask, do you like spicy food before you ask, what spicy dishes do you like? You can jump straight to what spicy dishes do you like? And if the answer is no, then the student will tell you that. So what spicy dishes do you like is a closed question to a certain extent, a specific question, but it's more extended than just yes, no. So there's more thinking going on. Oh yeah, I do like potato chips that they're salty, not spicy. So that kind of thinking needs to happen. What is your favorite food? That's a broader question, not just what spicy food do you like, but what is your favorite food? You have to think about all the different food that you have experienced. That's also an extended answer. Sorry, I got ahead of myself there. So that's an extended answer. What would you serve someone recovering from food poisoning is open-ended, not extended, and then higher order is the last one. What would you serve someone who is suffering from food poisoning? You need to think about spicy food. No, some people have problems with spicy food. You might research that milk is often good for people who have stomach cramps, so that might be on the list. You've got to think about the high order contextual outward answers. It's not about themselves anymore. It's not what spicy dishes do you like. It's how would you help somebody in this situation. Activity and task flow chart. This could almost be a seminar by itself. I want you to take away just a small amount from this one. I really hope that you can see that planning enables freedom. Planning by the teacher, intentionally setting up the situation, teaching the skills, making sure the students have learned the skills, making sure they have a good understanding of the goals of the game or the task. Doing all of that very intentionally will give freedom to the students when they play the game. In the same way that I talked about in a previous session about the actor who learns all of the lines in the play perfectly, learns all the moves, where to walk, where to look, when to say something, and of course what to say, what expression to have on their face. They learn every specific thing very carefully so that when they play the game, when they are on stage, they have the freedom to be extra creative and spontaneous. So let's go through this and look at it from a point of view of what to be precise about so that the students have freedom in their learning. First of all, when you're going to have an activity or a game, and this might be an activity or a game that is played once a week or once a month in class, it's probably a larger activity, not something that's small or just lasts a few minutes. You need to tell the students why they're going to do this, why it's going to be fun, what they'll learn from it. You need to connect it to something familiar so that they have a sense of, oh, it's a little bit like that. That's important. You need to express the goals of doing this activity, the learning goals, the social goals, working well in a team, language goals perhaps, even if it's science or math, there are still language goals. And the spirit of the game. If you tell the students that winning is important, then you're setting up a situation where some students might be prepared to break the rules in order to win. But if you talk about winning as you really truly only win when everyone has had a good time, when everyone has won within the rules, and the rules are very clear, then the spirit of the game is protected. And that's a very important lesson to teach students, that win at all costs is never without pain. Winning at all costs is never really winning. Ways and methods. So you teach them how to play this game. What needs to be done? What is an acceptable method and what is not? There is a wonderful game where you have a word written on a card and you need to speak about that word. and your team has to guess the word without you saying it. And there's another list of words, you're not allowed to say those either. But if you started spelling the word, technically you might be in the rules because you're not saying the word. But that's not one of the methods. So the teacher needs to make it very clear which methods are acceptable and which methods are unacceptable. And handing that over to the students to decide before the game what would be acceptable and what would not be acceptable is a real chance. Because in the adult world, we all have to decide what is within the spirit of the game when we are driving, when we are living beside our neighbours, when we are talking to our friends and colleagues, what is suitable and what is unsuitable, what is polite and what is not polite. All of these aspects are being taught right here in the ways and methods, in the spirit of the game, in the goals, the motivation and the purpose. So take your time if you're planning an activity. Don't rush to the activity and then say, oh, well, it didn't go too badly. Take your time. There's learning in every step of the way. Finally, we've told the students that this is why we are having a winner stays on quiz. You know those quizzes where everyone lines up and you pit the first two people against each other and the loser goes to the back of the line and the winner stays there? And you've given them the motivation and you've told them about listening to the questions at the front. And you've even told them a little secret that the questions will be repeated. You've got 30 students, 2 rows of 15, and you've only actually got 40 questions. So eventually they're going to get repeated. So the students need to listen carefully. And that would be one way of doing well and still staying in the spirit of the game. One of the rules in this game would be if the teacher says the student got it wrong, there's no time to argue because the next question is going to be read. So they need to go to the back of the line and the next participant will step up. You could do this online as well. If it was in boys versus girls and the girls are listed alphabetically and the boys are listed alphabetically, or all the students in the first half of the alphabet versus all the students in the second half of the alphabet, and they compete kind of alphabetically. And so now we're up to the start of the game, and the game runs, and the game's finished. And the teacher did not have to interfere in the game or the activity. The teacher did not have to, hopefully, remind the students of the spirit of the game, because the students played the game in the spirit of the game. The teacher did not have to remind the students and say, stop, everyone just stop. I need to remind you, these are the 3 rules. The teacher didn't have to do that because the students are reminding each other. The students most of them know the rules, and so the ones who are uncertain of the rules can follow. And so the game has minimum interference by the teacher. And hopefully the teacher's running around taking photos and videos of this wonderful activity. And if it's online, recording it, of course. And then the game finishes and there'll be some kind of an extension for the students who really achieved. So they get to shine even further or get another challenge. It's important to build that into the activity. And if you do one of these games every month and you kind of change it just a little bit, the students will be looking forward to the extension. Those who are ready for that challenge will be looking forward to that extension. This might be a TV show production that the students put on the last Friday of every month. Or it might be a role player play, a set of job interviews that are conducted as a performance in class. It might be some kind of a quest or a treasure hunt. If you can decide. The point here is to go through all of the steps very carefully so the start and finish, the game, has as much freedom as possible. And then you provide that extension, the added challenges, and some students will really be very motivated for those challenges. And the mop-up. At one end, you're giving extension and added challenges to the students who already have developed those skills. But then you're gathering those who just followed along in the game and didn't really achieve, and you're giving them further chances. Maybe a student has the knowledge, but they struggle because the game is rather fast-paced and they need to think. And so you let them answer some questions given time. Or you might ask them to record their own interview. Maybe they can interview another student asking very good questions. And so that gets played in the next lesson as a celebration of part of this game. Speaking of celebrations, if there isn't time during the game within the lesson, then the celebration would have to happen in the next lesson. And that's often a good thing because it gives you time to look at the photos and videos that you've taken or the notes that you've written about how students are going, your observation of the students. And so it's very much a time to sit back and say, let's just have a good look at this and see what we've learned and see what fun we had and celebrate every success, not just the very talented kids who have success, but anyone who's made an effort. It's very important. And then after the celebration, not before, after the celebration, there will be at least one, maybe several, teachable moments where you go back and say, okay, there were 3 questions in this quiz that were really tricky. They were really difficult because it was difficult to decide if the answers were correct or not. Let's have a look at those questions. And so the teachable moment would be in how to phrase questions that are specific and limited and have a specific answer. And so every activity like this is conducted and then celebrated, and then there is at least one, probably several, teachable moments. And send them off grown. This is actually a bit of a play on words in English. The word groan, spelled G-R-O-A-N, means to complain. And unfortunately, too often in education, students have walked out of a class groaning, complaining, or just sighing, saying, oh, I'm glad that's finished. But I'm using the other spelling, G-R-O-W-N, which comes from the word grow, to grow, growth mindset. Send them off grown. They should walk out of the class a little bit more confident and more certain and with more skill than when they walked in. They should log off their Zoom being a bit more confident about this topic, being a bit more expressive, having a bit more knowledge, having developed a further compared to when they logged on for the Zoom classroom. And here's the key to that point. It does not matter how small the progress was, but every student needs to have progressed, and every student needs to have understood that they've progressed. So they need to have made progress and realize it. So send them off grown. They actually go out, they log off their Zoom classroom, and they say, I learned today. I can now do something that I could not do before. Even if it's just a word they now know how to use. But they're aware of it. They know that now they know it. That's really important. Okay, and so we've motivated the students at the start that this is going to be a fun game. Now, if the last 9 games that you played with the students were not fun or not purposeful, they didn't learn much, and they weren't clear on the rules of the game, and the dominant students dominated, and there was nothing to celebrate, and the teachable moment was more like a discipline issue, then you're not going to send them off grown. But if you can motivate them, because the last games, every time you play a game, it's getting better and better, they'll have an expectation, and it will be easy to motivate them that the last Friday of every month is really a great time, and it's worth all of the preparation building up to it, the anticipation of the last Friday in the month game that we play in class, the quest, the challenge, the quiz, whatever it is. And so motivating and giving purpose to this particular game on this particular last Friday in the month should not be too difficult if you're building up your skills in developing this kind of lesson. The goals, don't have too many of them, and they should be specific. The spirit of the game is probably going to be very similar to the spirit of the previous games, and even the expectations in your classroom about valuing effort and time and so forth. And so those aspects should be fairly easy to relaunch once you've done it a few times. So I'd say small steps in this. Plan a small, simple game, but go through the steps: motivation, purpose, connect it to something familiar, establish the clear goals, state what the spirit of the game is, what it is not, the ways and methods of playing the game, who is the judge and whose decision will be final. And that might be a student. Rotate them around, don't have the same policewoman student every time. And then the game starts and finishes. It's a great time. The teacher takes screenshots and records it and takes observations, writes down observations of the wonderful expressions that the students came up with and the answers and the interactions. And then there's an added challenge for the kids who really know this material, and there are further chances for those who are struggling. And then there's a celebration with photos and videos and observations from the teacher and observations from the other students about who had the funniest answer, who had the bravest answer, perhaps, depending on the topic. Come up with all different trophies for this. And then teach them something very significant, something meaningful. And then they will have grown taller in their confidence as a learner, in their ability to express the concepts and the strategies, the vocabulary, and they will be able to apply this information in other circumstances. And that is where you get your growth mindset learning. Okay. It's a fairly complicated process. You've got 4, perhaps 5 steps before the game, and you've got the extension, the mop-up and the celebration, and then more teaching again, the teachable moment. But I can tell you this, as a once a month, or on a smaller scale, once a week, is a really fantastic way to recap, to revisit information, knowledge, skills, concepts, understandings, and it really does become worthwhile. It's worth the time and effort, and your students will remember it. Okay. Oh dear. Words that tear down. They're launchpad. They're launchpad. You're launching them off. But if you let negative words creep into your language or in the language of the students, then a lot of what I've been telling you about cannot happen. All of the good work will be undone. It will be torn down. And so I'm using English phrases here, and I guess as an English speaker, it has distressed me over the years how some Indonesian students quite happily use English swear words. But they wouldn't use the Indonesian swear words, but they'll use English ones. But my suggestion to you is that it doesn't matter what the language is. Any negative word does not have a place in your classroom. So please do not call students any of these words. And there are other phrases. Don't you understand? Is a very sharp put down. I've told you 3 times, go read the book again. Very dismissive. And that's a fixed mindset that says, I don't believe you're trying because you're lazy. So saying, don't you understand, is very much out of the millennial teacher's vocab. Can't. We don't say can't, we say not yet. But with persistence, with effort, with resilience, with plan B, you will get there. You cannot do it yet, but with all of those strategies and support, you will get there. Okay, so we don't say give up. We don't say I don't believe you tried. Because words have power, we do not say those negative put-downs. They are not helpful. If a student is tired, hungry, or scared, fearful, they cannot learn much. And so if you're using words like this, or if other students are using words like this, a student can become fearful and therefore they will not learn very much at all. Words have power, which means positive words have enormous power. Mother Teresa said, kind words are short and easy to speak. So once you get into the habit of them, it's not too difficult. It becomes a really positive habit. Kind words are short and easy to speak, but their echoes are truly endless. Your encouragement of your students will be remembered for a long time, and it will even sit in their subconscious and encourage them not to give up, even if they don't actually reflect or remember specifically your words. It builds up a resilience and a positivity in them because you are part of their environment. So what will the students learn? Okay, we're sticking with language at this stage. Information. If you are teaching information, it's a valid part of learning. You need to use lists, definitions, and formulas. Make rhymes, make acrostics where the first letter of each word in the list makes a word. Do all of this because they do need some remembered information. But if you're teaching rules and the way to do things, for example, how to make a hypothesis in science, or an awareness, a how-to process, then stories, videos, conversations, speculation, and problem solving are more appropriate. If you need the students to remember 10 things, it's not necessarily the time to speculate about what else could there be. So give them the list. But when they are looking at ways to do things or an awareness of a process, then using stories and problem solving, etc., could be the better way. Understanding and synthesis, putting different parts of the puzzle together. This information and that timeline and these resources, these circumstances, what is the perfect fit? So understanding the why question, give the students something to experience. Give them a role play to express this understanding, to get an idea or a grip on this understanding. Give them completion exercises where half of the answer is there and they need to find the other half. These word games and strategies all come back to the mindset. Are you going to encourage a fixed mindset where the smart kids can sit at the back of the class and the dumb kids can sit at the front of the class? Or are you going to have a growth mindset where every student has the ability, the capacity to improve? And so you will walk around to every student wherever they are sitting. So let's have a look. What do you believe? Are some people talented, but others are not? Now, certainly there is truth in that statement to a small extent, but it does not mean that you cannot learn something. That's the difference. So if your classroom is a classroom where anyone can learn to do anything better, then you've got a growth mindset classroom. Does effort make a difference? Of course it does. Can talented people succeed without trying? The answer is only up to a certain extent, only some of the way. Australia has 2 tennis players who are about 22, 25 years old, and neither of them have coaches because they're too arrogant, and they both admit that they don't train very much, and they are both in the top 200 in the world for male tennis players. So they could get there based on talent, but can they get to the top 10? Can they stay in the top 10? So talented people can get somewhere, but they can't really fulfill their maximum potential. Are mistakes a sign of failure? No. Mistakes are a necessary part of the process of learning. And so never put a student down for making a mistake, but thank them and say, what can we learn here? And what can your friend learn here from your mistake? And ask them to share their mistake another time if they make another one. Do only smart people succeed? Yes, only smart people succeed. What is the definition of smart? Having a growth mindset, being resilient, putting in the practice. All of the aspects that we've talked about is really the definition of smart. Talented will only get you so far. Smart is the strategies, the effort, the open-mindedness to look for an alternative strategy, to learn from your mistakes. That is a smart person. So when a child in your class makes a mistake, tell them they are smart because they've learned from the mistake. Okay, so this is what we have to avoid. Grouping people and labeling people as good or not good. With effort, children can maximize their full capacity. When you say that in a fixed mindset sense, it can be basically, it's going to take too much effort. You'll never be a world-renowned piano player, so give up now. But put in a growth mindset situation, it works. People are good at something, therefore they don't need to try. Like I said before, it only goes to a certain level. And being ashamed of mistakes, not in this millennium. Okay, millennial teachers, smart people make mistakes and learn from them. Okay. And the last false statement, smart people succeed but dumb people don't. I guess that's true if you say that smart people are growth mindset people. And everyone has the capacity to be a growth mindset person. Okay, now the positives. Growth mindset people value learning and want to learn. Like the girl in the cartoon. Take that picture of the girl in the cartoon with you in your mind, and it sums up all of these things. It will trigger the learning that you have processed today. They see the efforts as a way to succeed. So putting in the practice is actually an investment in knowledge and skills. Growth mindset people learn from mistakes, which we've said several times, and knowing that they can always improve. Everyone can improve in their particular skill. Embracing challenges. Keep trying even when it is hard. Persistence, resilience, and teachers and students have learned and shown a lot of resilience in this last year. Resilience we did not think we had, and so it is true. Knowing that feedback leads to more learning and more progress. So not just saying sugar-coated compliments to people, to students, but finding the positives and also finding the feedback that they can work on further. There is some respect in telling your students what they can work on further, as well as telling them the really good things of their activity or their writing, their performance. And as I said earlier on, growth mindset people love to see others succeed. And that is when you know you have a growth mindset community. Okay. We've talked about what is a student and what is learning and how to scaffold that learning, how to build it up, and how to have a growth mindset, and how to be positive and not putting down with words. Do all of those things describe you as a teacher? Here is one definition of a teacher. A teacher is open-minded. While modeling appropriate distance, teachers are readable. So they don't have to express every emotion that they might be feeling, but they are consistent. And if a teacher is feeling tired, they can tell the students, I'm feeling a bit tired today, but I'm going to press on. I'm here because you guys need to learn, and that's what I'm here to do. Even though I'm a bit tired, I might be sitting down during class. Teachers are accepting. They accept that students come into the class with different abilities, experiences, opportunities, different qualities of sleep, different nutrition levels, all of those things, different self-esteem issues. And so they're accepting, and they don't label the learners. There is no shame connected to the struggle of learning. Teachers build trust. That is one of your biggest duties as a teacher. Not just trust where a student will blindly follow anybody, but trust where they accept what you say as a good thing, and they are willing to work hard because you have given them the task and they trust you, because you turn failing into flying. You need to be a fan of learning. You need to love learning. Sadly, I've met a few English teachers who have told me they don't like reading. Well, then you're not really a language teacher. I think if you don't love reading, you need to learn to love reading. If you're a science teacher, find a part of science that you love experimenting with. If you're a math teacher, find geometry or something. Teach yourself computer programming or something that you can really get passionate about that's connected to your subject. Be a lifelong learner. Understanding. Teachers need to walk in the shoes of their students, not walk in the shoes that you want them to wear, but walk in the shoes they're wearing, so you understand where they are coming from. You understand their struggles. And when you have been open-minded, accepting, building up trust, you're a fan of learning, and you show the students that you understand, then you can serve the students, which is why teaching is called a calling or a vocation. It is not just a job. And so if you can tick off some of those boxes, that's fantastic. Your aim is to build up gradually to tick off all of those boxes and make those things the way you walk and the way you talk in and out of the classroom. Okay, discussion topic. How can you determine what your students will learn? It's something about materials. So have a talk about that, and I will provide you with some discussion in a moment. Okay, what will students learn? They will learn lists, definitions, formulas, rules, rhymes, question types, stories, films, conversations, speculation, spelling mistake there, and problem solving. Experiencing role plays, completion, and exercises. What we talked about before, your students are learning specific information connected to specific understandings. And they're building on those understandings to build up their skills and their capacity for learning and their capacity to apply what they've learned to other situations. So from these 4 sessions that we have had today, you can see that they all kind of overlap with each other. And so creating your classroom kingdom by having a teacher presence and by engaging the students and connecting with their deeper purposes is a growth mindset type of behaviour, which fits into our Fair Work rules. It's very much a growth mindset attitude to get the students to talk about understandings and the environmental conditions for learning, rather than just giving them rules that they have to obey without question. Guide your students to make practical and clear guidelines. And finally, their launchpad is the culmination, the result of the first 3. And that's where they take the learning and they go in regional competitions and they make their own vegetable garden at home and they advise someone about something and they practice really hard to play guitar. And so they are using the knowledge. They can take science back home and use it in the kitchen. They can take math back home and use it when they're constructing something. And of course, on the computer, learning application is limitless. So expect, plan, and work to launch them. Everything you've done and do is for that purpose, so that we have young adults becoming adults who are living fulfilled lives. And so that brings us to the end. I thank you very much, Millennial teachers, for your time, for your concentration. My sincere hope is that you can take something, that you walk out of this, that you log off from the Zoom grown, G-R-O-W-N, that you have grown in some way and that you can write down a plan for some steps that you want to make in your classroom. And remember that when you try some of these things and they fail, and they will fail, that you learn from that, build on that, and grow from that. And your students will too. Tell your students, we're going to try this. And do your best and don't give up. And you will actually be modeling what you want your students to do. And they will respond by changing their behavior and their learning attitude. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.